Plant-based chat, and you know it's one of my favorite times of the week. And one of my favorite people to chat with is Dr. Stephanie Peacock, who is just so sweet and amazing. And I love her whole vibe. And Stephanie, I know we talk about it, and you're just like, stop it, quit it. I know, a little tears leaking out of your eye.
Gets me every time.
But one of the things that I like, so we've been doing a lot of talks with Stephanie, so you might be familiar with her already, but you can go to stephaniepeacock.com, and she works with private clients and on different health issues. One of the things that I've been asking about selfishly, because of my liver stuff, is we've been talking a lot about how to remove toxins out of your environment. So we've talked about like pots and pans and cleaning products and baking dishes and things that make people nervous. So today we're going to take a little break from that. But what I love about you, Dr. Steph, is that you're just like, see where you are on the scale and how much, toxins may be affecting you or not, and then pick your poison, right? I guess literally. I didn't even mean that to happen. But if you want to eat canned beans, because we're always going to have some canned beans, but maybe think of some other ways. So what we're going to do today, hey Marion, oh my God, I was just in the meeting with Marion. She is awesome. She is actually in another business group I have. She's a tarot reader. And she's from Scotland, and she is delightful. So, yeah, and Mona is here, and Justine is here. You guys are just hanging out and are awesome. So, what I thought we would talk about today, because we had mentioned this last month, it came up, SIBO. And I hear SIBO, and I know I have friends that have done the like blowing test or something, but I know nothing. So if you guys know something and you have questions, please put them in the comments. Hey Betsy, so that we can do that. But I think what I'm going to ask Dr. Steph, first go ahead, as always, introduce yourself in case someone is new to you, and tell them where they can find you and all the super cool stuff that you do. But then maybe explain what SIBO is, maybe some of the symptoms, how I would even go, hey, Dr. Steph, I think I might have SIBO. Like what would even lead me down that path? And I'm going to go ahead and move the screen so you get to have all of it.
Perfect. And then feel free to interrupt at some points like that. Any questions or anything at all, because there's a lot of little moving parts to SIBO. So I'll go ahead and just quickly explain who I am. So hi everyone, thanks for joining, and those who are watching the replay, thank you for watching. And thank you, Kathy, for having me on your show again. I absolutely love coming on. Like I always say, once a month, it's just so delightful to come on and hang out with you and your viewers. So my name's Dr. Stephanie. I am a holistic doctor down in Southern California. Like Kathy said, I do work with private clients. I work with patients all over nationwide and internationally as well. My specialties lie in root cause, like stubborn gut issues. So specifically SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, SIFO, which is small intestinal fungal overgrowth, and then IBS. So those are the three things that I really focus around, because oftentimes these conditions, they get diagnosed, but the important piece is finding the root cause of those. So those are actually just symptoms the body's experiencing, whatever GI distress you're having, of something else that's underlying and occurring within the body. So my job is to figure out what that is. So that's really what I focus on. How I focus on it is, again, root cause analysis is what I do, but also working on addressing environmental toxins that are found in your environment, because toxic load that overloads our body's ability to detoxify anything out of our system. When we overwhelm our bodies with toxins in the environment, like we talked about in plenty of our other chats, it overwhelms the body's ability to excrete it out. So then we just get a recirculation of toxins in the system, resulting in a variety of different mystery symptoms, which usually result in like fatigue and brain fog and skin issues. the non-alcoholic fatty liver, gut issues, the list pretty much kind of headaches, migraines, things like that. The list kind of goes on and on. So that's a big piece and a big missing piece in many people's health journeys. But then I also utilize water fasting and juice fasting. I did my residency at TrueNorth Health Center, which is a water fasting facility. I absolutely love that place. So I do utilize some fasting within my practice as well. And then, of course, adopting a whole food plant-based diet, because that is going to be the best diet to support anti-inflammatory and supporting your body. So that's what I do and how I do it. And I'll go ahead and start talking about SIBO. So
let me ask you one question. So I've heard of SIBO, but I never heard of the fungal one.
Yeah, so SIFO is like a candida overgrowth is basically what it is. Yeah.
Okay,
So
got
it's like,
it.
yeah, I figured you would know that. Yeah, it's usually called a candida overgrowth. Candida is just a species of yeast or fungus, and so SIFO is like where it's in the small intestine, it's overgrown there, kind of like a bacteria that's overgrown. So
perfect,
yeah.
and that helps a lot, because I was like, it seems weird that SIBO is talked about so much, but this other one I had never heard, and that makes sense.
Yeah, great question. That's such a great question. So what SIBO is so it's pretty much aligns with the symptoms of IBS. So having bloating, pain, like abdominal, like distension, having irregular bowel movements like constipation, diarrhea, or even a mix of both. Those are really the three criteria that usually are needed in order to make the diagnosis of IBS when all other things have been ruled out. And IBS is kind of that umbrella term diagnosis where it's just like, okay, it's kind of almost like a diagnosis of exclusion. We've already figured out that it's not anything very serious like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or anything. So then we're just like, okay, well, you have these symptoms, so you must have irritable bowel syndrome. But the sad thing is that most people will end up living with it for a very long time without ever getting any sort of relief from it. And up to 70% of IBS is actually SIBO. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And so what this means is naturally we have tons and tons of bacteria. I mean, we have like thousands of bacteria, right, that reside in us that make up our gut microbiome. They're actually housed within the large intestine. So that large intestine when we think of gut microbiome, we're thinking large intestine, housing all these wonderful gut bacteria, bugs, yeast, things like that. And those are actually important for our health. But the issue with SIBO is that it's the location of it. So normally it's in the large intestine, but somehow it's made its way into the small intestine and it's overgrown there. So SIBO is excessive numbers of this bacteria as well as the location of it being in the small intestine. So it stands for small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And the symptoms align with IBS. So it's bloating, it's pain, it's constipation, diarrhea. It could be a mix of any of those. Oftentimes, and I'll go ahead and run through some symptoms right now. So oftentimes people will feel like they just get bloated after every meal. They look 7 to 9 months pregnant by the end of the night. Again, constipated, diarrhea. Another key indicator is that somebody decided to start eating more plant-based or healthy, and they noticed that their gut symptoms got worse. So by eating more fiber actually makes the symptoms worse, because the reason why is these bacteria, they're in the large intestine, right, normally. And we know fiber is so good for us. It's actually the best thing for us, because what happens is our body's enzymes aren't meant to actually break it down. So that's why the fiber will make its way all the way to the large intestine for those bacteria to eat it up, break it up, create short chain fatty acids to help fight inflammation. But when this bacteria is in the small intestine, that's not the job of the small intestine. The job of the small intestine is to fully break down the food and then absorb the nutrients. So when the bacteria is there, it's fermenting all the food that we eat and it's producing tons of gas. And then that's why we get this bloating. We get a lot of these weird symptoms like constipation and diarrhea. And that's why when people switch over to a plant-based diet, they feel worse because they're increasing their fiber intake. And this is a key thing that you'll hear people that are like carnivore or, eating a lot of keto, and they felt good with their gut health. And then they suddenly switched over to plant-based and they felt worse. So they're like, well, I'm just going to go back over to my carnivore or meat eating ways because they felt better. And it makes sense why they felt better, but they're not figuring out the root cause of what's going on. So we have to get in there to diagnose and treat it and then get rid of that bacteria to ultimately allow the gut to heal. Other symptoms of SIBO too, I'll run through it. So again, bloating is the hallmark symptom. That's one of the biggest ones. Another big one is like acid reflux, because if you're having a lot of pressure within your abdominal wall from the gas that's getting produced, it's producing acid that will come back up. Feeling like food sitting in your stomach, so you get full really quickly, nausea. And then oftentimes, depending on what type of bacteria has overgrown, you can also develop like nerve pain, nerve tingling sensations. You can get joint pain from the inflammation of it because the bacteria is in a place where it shouldn't be. And there's other symptoms and things like that as well. But yes, so, and I can also run across more of those, but that's pretty much a lot of the symptoms that it aligns with irritable bowel syndrome basically, but a lot of times it's SIBO.
That's really, really clear to me. So like one of the things I'm thinking is that I probably don't have it.
Yeah, usually it's pretty obvious in a way. Like people will be like, I just have this distension or this bloating or these GI issues that just will not go away. And I'm eating better, I'm eating healthier, and it's just making it worse. That's usually kind of what I see when people come to work with me with the SIBO piece.
Okay, that's great to know because the people that I know that were testing for it kind of had mystery diseases. We've talked a little bit about that, and you had that in your background.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we find a lot of times when we're trying to figure things out, so that's why I was wondering. Justine is asking, can SIBO come and go on its own, or do you need doctor's guidance?
That's such a great question. I love that this was asked. So it can't go away on its own. It has to be treated with antimicrobials or antibiotics. So when I say antimicrobials, usually what I use in my practice, because under my license, I can't prescribe antibiotics anyways. So I use nutraceuticals or herbal antibiotics. So different types of herbs that will treat it, which I prefer anyways. And it's just as effective as the antibiotic anyways. But you have to use it to actually, which will target the bacteria within that small intestine to help get rid of it. So you actually have to treat it with supplements essentially to help get rid of it. And then the biggest piece to SIBO is there are over 75 risk factors for developing it. So it's usually something that caused a decrease in your gut motility or causing like a gut dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in that gut bacteria, creating inflammation that will usually cause SIBO. And so the biggest pieces is figuring out the root cause or why this person has small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, because otherwise after we treat it, if we don't figure out the root cause, then they're just going to get it again. 2/3 of patients that have SIBO actually relapse. And that's because the root cause wasn't figured out. So people will end up getting SIBO 6 months after they treat it. They go back on antibiotics, they get it again, they go back on antibiotics. It's like a vicious cycle. And so the biggest piece for me is I look at it as a 3-phase approach when I treat people. I spend an hour and a half to 2 hours of my initial consult just diving into the root causes and figuring out what it is. And then we figure out what the treatment's going to be for that person, because it has to be very individualized depending on the person. And then after that, it's a gut rebuilding phase. So we have to work on treating the gut, right? Because what happens is a SIBO, it's so inflammatory that it creates leaky gut. So then you start to get a break in that membrane that separates the small intestine from the blood, and you absorb more toxins, you absorb more things from your food, you absorb more inflammation essentially. And so we have to work on sealing up that gut lining and then getting somebody to just to rebuild their gut health back essentially. So we work on that piece as well.
Now, one thing, and I didn't ask you about this ahead of time, but I suspect you know it off the top of your head, because I know someone was on a SIBO diet, and so they were plant-based, and they found it very hard to be on a SIBO diet as a plant-based human being.
Yes, a great question. So there's quite a few different diets out there for SIBO. There's like it's the low FODMAP. That's probably the one that you might be thinking of, because it's essentially reducing all these fermentable carbohydrates, which when you look at it, if somebody's plant-based, it's just like, oh my gosh, like what do I even eat? There's also a low fermentation diet, low carbohydrate diet, all these different things. What these diets do is they just help to reduce the symptoms. Because you're reducing what these bacteria like to eat on, right? So then you're making it less, so you're reducing the symptoms, but you're not treating the SIBO and you're not getting to that root cause piece. So I will tell you that majority of people that I work with, I rarely place anybody on a low FODMAP diet because of that reason. It's just too restrictive. And I find that there's other things that are triggering people as well. So I run through like at least like a food diary of a week with all my patients to figure out, looking at like sort of like just picking apart like the foods that they're eating, because there's all different types of foods. There's high histamine foods, high salicylate foods. These different ones can trigger SIBO as well. And so sometimes I'll place somebody on, it's not a restrictive diet, but it's just, let's try to eat a little bit lower histamine foods, like not as much spinach, aged foods like sauerkraut, kimchi. Those foods tend to really aggravate SIBO. So in the meantime, what we do is we reduce some of the foods that we are seeing trigger them, and then we go in to treat the SIBO, and then we can introduce those beautiful foods again for people to diversify their gut and then overall have good gut health after.
Okay, and that sounds honestly, and here, let me.
Better. Probably better than it doing.
Yeah, I know for me, because like you're already not feeling well and you're already trying, so I can just imagine. So you're trying to eat healthier, so you're probably eating more foods that could actually trigger this, it sounds like. So if I was eating a lot, like now I'm literally finishing my lunch behind the scenes, my potato. So I would be eating a lot of potatoes, a lot of rice, maybe. And, you know, fermented foods, I actually just started some of my first sauerkrauts and stuff. So if I had gotten that, it would be really sad. And I have a friend who's on a low histamine diet because she's having a lot of itching and breaking out and stuff. And she is also plant-based. And so I'm learning a little bit about it, but it's you know, the worst thing is feeling bad and then not being able to eat something delicious, even if it's broth. Do you know, it doesn't have to, or miso. You know, miso I think is a high histamine food, isn't it? Or is it? Yeah.
It is. And I will tell you, probably about 50% of my patients have to do a low histamine plant-based diet. I have a very specific plan I set up for my patients. And the reason and the reason I say 50% is because 50% of my patients, one of the root causes of SIBO is actually, or a reason why SIBO cannot resolve, is something called mast cell activation syndrome. And this is when our body's first line of defense, these mast cells, they're a type of white blood cell, they start to become overwhelmed and hyper responsive, making you very sensitive to most foods. And those cells, what they do is they release histamine. So going on a low histamine diet helps to support this mast cell piece, and then helps to reduce the body's response to trying to just be super overactive and respond to so many different types of foods and triggers and stress and things like that. But these cells, again, their job is to sense information from the environment and then relay it back to the nervous system, relay it back to your body. And a lot of the symptoms of mast cell activation syndrome are like the hives, the itching, the skin issues, severe GI issues, things like that, because these cells line every part of our body except for our retina and our eyes. So I know I said that I focus on the gut issue piece, but I actually am certified in treating mast cell activation syndrome as well, because that is one of the biggest things I see in not letting people resolve their SIBO. And I will tell you that a trigger for somebody to develop mast cell activation syndrome is actually an overload of environmental toxins. So oftentimes when I say people have these mystery illnesses, I'm actually referring to potentially having mast cell activation syndrome, because it's the body now has become the nervous system has become so overloaded and overwhelmed by triggers in the environment that now it doesn't know how to respond normally to things like eating something that might be like spinach that has high histamines in it. It doesn't know how to respond normally to that, so it freaks out. Or if you smell freshly paint on the wall, that's a toxin that can trigger somebody's skin issues, or maybe like an asthma reaction. So it's essentially a brain fog and fatigue are such common symptoms of it too. So it's essentially the nervous system is on this crazy high alert. So when people try to treat their underlying gut issue like SIBO or IBS, it won't work because the body is in too much of an inflamed state to accept the treatment protocol. So I hope that made sense, because I know I'm kind of talking about a couple different things right now, but essentially when it boils down to SIBO, it's figuring out what are the root cause or causes of it so that we can get in there, treat that, and then give you the antimicrobials that are correct for you to then treat and get rid of the bacteria, and then we rebuild the gut health again.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. And,
Yeah.
it just makes me think, because I was telling you, and my people know too, I've been doing the 12-day McDougall program that I just finished yesterday. And one of the things that I noticed so quickly was the first 2 days, like all my inflammation went away. Like I could feel it. And so like it was very weird. And like Cheryl's legs, I actually made a joke to them, and I said, Cheryl's legs went from being, a little bit swollen to her normal bird legs, And so like I could see it happening to her and feel it happening to me. And it seems like in almost, I would say at least most diagnoses, it seems like inflammation, which is the body trying to do something good, actually ends up harming some things too. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
That is such a great thing you brought up, because again, and I always try to tell my patients this too, and exactly what you said, Kathy, it's so beautifully said, is a lot of our symptoms that come, like whether in their annoying symptoms, right? Like inflammation or gut issues or whatever it is we're dealing with, headaches, migraines, it's the body trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you to look here, something's not right. So it's the body signaling you. The body is in a protective mode. It wants to survive. That's its ultimate goal. So it's never trying to hurt you and be like, haha, like, let me make you suffer for the rest of your life because you deserve it or something. It's the body really trying to tell you something's going on. So like what you said, that's exactly it. It's some sort of it's something that's triggered an inflammatory response within the body. So whether it's overloading your body on processed foods, animal products, things that cause inflammation for an extended period of time, being overexposed to environmental toxins, like not just the ones that we talk about that are in, our products, but mold or volatile organic compounds, which are these compounds that get released from paint, new furnishings, things like that, and they can be released into the air that we breathe. So getting overexposed to or stress, like trauma, like emotional trauma, any sort of physical trauma, things like that, like anything that overwhelmed the body, or even like a car accident. I will find that a lot of my patients' root causes are actually stemming from severe whiplash or a concussion that they had, because that actually decreases gut motility, because it's impacting the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a very important nerve that starts in our brain and works its way all the way down to our gut. And when that nerve becomes impacted, it actually decreases the ability of the gut to move things along. So it's all kinds of things that, we have to really look into. What was the source of that inflammation? Like what is causing that piece? And then we have to work on decreasing that inflammation, absolutely, through food, through lifestyle choices, through meditation, things like that. But also treating that root cause, and then treating in this case, what we've been talking about, the SIBO. And one other thing I wanted to mention with SIBO too is, usually what I find on labs too is if somebody has chronic low ferritin, which is iron storage, that's a big sign of SIBO. And then another sign is chronic low vitamin D, because SIBO is constantly eating those up essentially for fuel. So or low omega-3s as well. So that's something else that I find consistently on people's lab reports when they send me, because I don't just look at gut issues stuff, right? I'm looking at their lab reports. I'm looking at mold test results, right? It's a whole picture we have to look at. Sometimes I see elevated liver enzymes because the liver is just working overload to try to the liver does over 500 functions in the body. So it's like constantly trying to like help detoxify everything. So I'll see elevated liver enzymes, all kinds of different things that I see with SIBO. So so it's looking at the whole picture, just like you said.
Well, and I love the way that you're talking about this. And one of the reasons too is like, if you go to a typical doctor, and hopefully all of you who are watching this have magical doctors. Like I love my doctor here, Dr. Bean. She's in Chapel Hill. If you're in the area, get on her waiting list because she's full, but she's awesome. And so usually when you go somewhere, she would talk to you about these things. But a lot of times, especially if you don't have a GP who's really following you, or if it's just someone you really just go to get that thyroid prescription or something, and they don't know you, I feel like they don't necessarily look at this whole picture. So I think it's really awesome that you are, because then you get to be a part of that medical care, because I think sometimes we need to have more than one medical professional sometimes to help us on our way, even if if it's a chiropractor, if it's, someone helping you with, maybe even just helping your doctor look at some of these tests a different way. Because I'm big on second opinions. I'm also big on finding a doctor you really trust, because my doctor before this was what I had for a very long time and was great, and changed drastically. So the old doctor I love doesn't exist anymore, and that makes it even harder.
Right. Oh, yes.
But
Definitely. No.
Cheryl and I go into our appointments together. So they schedule us a little back-to-back block. They don't have to clean the room. We try to make it easy on them. But also, one of us is going to forget something big that happened in the past 4 to 6 months. And I'm going to be like, don't forget to tell her you tripped and this happened. And so it's kind of nice. I feel like we get that in. But you want to have a doctor that's open to what's most helpful for you too, I think. How do you feel about that?
I really feel so strongly about that. And, you had mentioned earlier that I did go through my own healing journey. It was like a 10-year battle I pretty much had with like mast cell activation, toxic load, because it was toxic load for my environment. And then I had SIBO for 10 years. It was horrible. I looked 9 months pregnant every single night. Absolutely. I didn't want to be social, go out to meals with people, because anything I ate just triggered me. And I'd say and then I went plant-based halfway through my SIBO journey, and my symptoms were, oh my gosh, if they could get worse, they did. They got so much worse. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Because I was just like, something's wrong, because I do my research, and I'm like, I'm eating the best diet possible. I'm doing all the right things. I'm exercising, I'm taking care of my nervous system, and something is wrong. And finally, I found someone who listened to me. And I was overjoyed. I couldn't believe that someone took longer than 15 minutes with me. She took 2 hours to talk to me, look at my labs, understand my root causes. And that was what motivated me to want to be good, be that person for my patients. And that's why my consults are an hour and a half to 2 hours, because it takes way longer than 15 or 30 minutes to figure out what's going on with somebody. And so if you can find someone that you really align with, who really takes the time to listen to you and who's really listening and to understand what's going on, it feels so good to have somebody just be that person that's listening to everything that you have to say, because it's just, it can feel so lonely when you're struggling with some health issue.
I totally agree with that. And I think also it can be hard, but I think it's important for us to kind of assert that kind of self-care, because we think of self-care as like, I got a pedicure, I got a massage. But self-care can be taking a nap. Self-care can be making sure you have a doctor that you feel good about. And even before I went to the McDougall program, I talked to several people about Dr. Lim, because I'm so doctor shy right now, and I was assured that he was going to be even nicer than I could hope for. And he was. And some of our appointments ended up not being, okay, I've looked at your labs and let's talk about this, but like, well, how can you be kinder to Kathy? How can we reduce this stress load? How can we? So the first appointment I had with him, it felt, if I describe it to someone else, it sounds like I saw a psychologist, not that I saw my doctor. Right?
It will sound like that when you see someone who really listens to you and who's looking at not just the lab portion or not just this, but like what else is in your life, what stressors are in your life, like what can we do to like support you in your well-being, right? Like, because health is so multifactorial. It's not just one thing. It's not just focusing on diet or exercise. It's so much more. And I love that you had that experience, because it makes me so happy to know there's just more people out there doing that. And I know there are, but when I hear it, it makes me so happy, because it's just wonderful that other people get that wonderful experience too,
I know exactly what you mean. And just like many things, a lot of times people are more likely to be vocal about really bad experiences and not to be as vocal with good ones. So I always try to, when I have a good one, to talk a lot about that too, because there are magical people out there. I do have a question for you. It's from Justine. She suffers with occasional constipation. She finds that taking psyllium husk powder seems to help. Is it safe to take daily?
Yes. Psyllium husk powder is a wonderful prebiotic, and it is safe to take daily. It's absolutely wonderful. And, and that's great that if it's just kind of like occasionally too, right? That's wonderful, because that's just a sign that maybe it's just something that was just a little blip. Because the thing is constipation can be from multiple things. Like SIBO is one of them, but it can be just from maybe like lack of fiber. It could be stress. It could just be feeling overwhelmed the day before. All these different things. Traveling can cause it, right? So it's just being out of your normal routine. So there's all kinds of things. So if you're experiencing and I know this wasn't the question, but if you're experiencing any sort of like occasional constipation, things like that, there's usually like a nice, easier reason for it than it being something chronic. But that actually brings me to, so I do love psyllium husk, but the piece of SIBO that I didn't mention, I'd love to mention, was how you talked about your friends breathing into those bags and the tests for it. I think it would be good to maybe touch on that, because it is the official test for SIBO, and I'll just kind of explain it really quickly so people understand what that is. So with SIBO, again, for those that are joining now, it's an overgrowth of bacteria within the small intestine that has the very same symptoms of IBS. It's bloating, distension, nausea, acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, things like that. And so what occurs with that is there's different types of bacteria that can overgrow, but what they do is when they ferment the food you're eating, they actually produce different gases. And what the breath test is doing, it's the best test to test for SIBO. It's actually measuring the 3 different gases that can get produced to let us know what's in the body. So there's 3 different ones. It's hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. So hydrogen usually is more correlated with diarrhea. Methane is more constipation. And then hydrogen sulfide is usually a mix of both. And that one's usually the more toxic one. So usually people will have they'll feel very toxic. Like they can't even take like magnesium, like salt baths, because the sulfur from that because it's hydrogen sulfide, it's a sulfur compound that will actually trigger people's symptoms. They'll feel like numbness, tingling, severe leaky gut symptoms, brain fog, fatigue, all kinds of stuff. So so that test actually will measure those gases, and you breathe into 9 separate bags over the period of 2 hours. So it's like 1 bag every 15 minutes, because it's measuring the entire tract of the small intestine, because the small intestine is actually 25 feet long. So we're measuring the gases that are being produced along the entire intestine to see. And then when I see, as a result, is I will see it's basically a chart showing me like how much gas there is, like per each one, hydrogen, methane, or hydrogen sulfide, and it will tell me how much there is. So we measure it in parts per million, and there's specific criteria for if it's positive or negative. But that's what the breath test is for, because that's so important to, 1, diagnose SIBO, but 2, understand what gas you have to help determine what herbs are suited for that specific gas. And then 3, it's telling us how much there is, so we know how long the treatment plan should be. Because most people that have SIBO, they by their gastroenterologist, they get placed on like 1-2 week treatment protocol to get rid of it. And usually that's never enough time. That's not usually enough for SIBO. I usually have to treat between 1 to 3 months to fully get rid of SIBO for most of my patients with antimicrobials. So, I usually see the tougher cases too. I usually see the people that have had it for a long, long time. So the gas is built up over a little bit of time. So, but I just wanted to mention that piece with the testing.
Because a friend of mine, I was having a meeting with her, and she's like, just give me a minute, I've got to blow in my last bag. And I thought, that's so strange. So thank you for explaining that. Kelly is saying that she had her doctor hang up on her after 10 minutes on a telemedicine call.
Oh my gosh, 10 minutes? That's like not even enough time to get into anything. Wow.
It's just really weird. And I think of some of my experiences in the past too. Like I remember I had a bladder infection. It was the middle of the night. I was very uncomfortable. So this was decades ago. You call and they send you to whoever the doctor for the practice is on call. And I'm like, can you just call me in some meds? I know what this is. I've had it. And he fell asleep on me. And also he said, well, you might as well just call in the morning because there are no pharmacies open. And I'm like, there's a 24-hour pharmacy 5 minutes for me? Can you please just call this in because I'm miserable?
Oh, wow. I can't believe they fell asleep on you. Wow. That's unbelievable. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and in the past, this was at least 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And, you just pick a doctor out of a list and you're asking people who you work with, who do you see, right? Because you're just being the normal person. But I saw the nurse practitioner once who was lovely and always remembered why I was there and could always read the chart before she would ask me. Like, there's nothing that irritates me more unless it's somebody who doesn't know me. If you don't know me, ask me anything you want. But if you know me and I go to you and because I have I have Graves' disease, so I drink radioactive iodine, so I take a Synthroid. So I have to go several times a year just to check my thyroid levels. It's not a big deal, but look at my chart and go, oh, you're here for your thyroid, right? That's all I need to know. If you're my regular doctor, you should know something.
Exactly. I'm 100% there with you. And I feel so bad for all the people that have had such, horrible experiences, but I think it also motivates us to kind of be advocates for our own health and then really push and want to know more and learn more about what may be going on with us or what we can do to support our body. And, we've been talking about SIBO and mast activation syndrome and other things that are going on, but really the big thing is you can still take your health into your own hands by one, being an advocate for yourself, but two, just eating super well and doing the best you can to eat anti-inflammatory because we're eating 3 to 5 meals a day. So, that's a lot of food that we're ingesting. So trying to eat mostly organic, eating lots of diversity, colorful fruits and vegetables, like what Kathy's doing with the McDougall program, just eating so well. You said that you've been noticing such a decrease in your inflammation. That is amazing. And just goes to show that it really starts with the basics, and start there and, get good sleep, move your body. It doesn't have to be a high intensity exercise workout. It could be a 10-minute walk twice a day. Right. And it's just taking a nap, maybe treat yourself and go get a massage, go do something that feels good, things like that is so important, and then again, we've talked so much about reducing toxic load. You can go back through all our previous YouTube videos and pick one and be okay, I'll start with the plastics. We'll start reducing the plastic. We'll start reducing that toxic load, right? There's so many things we can do to just really support our health. And then if something else is, occurring and still speaking to you, then that's definitely look out and, reach out for that. But it's so important. Don't ever be afraid to be an advocate for yourself because we honestly, in this world, we have to be. So.
And I think
Kathy, I actually can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I said that's a perfect segue for kind of where we should go from SIBO, because it's plant-based chat and we always, so we're having real grown-up people chats and conversations, and it leads to other things, which to me is one of my favorite parts about this. And I love the way it's kind of gone into you can kind of control some things, because I think when you don't feel good, okay, so I'm cranky when I don't feel good. I can almost tell when I'm getting a virus because cranky and I want to leave the house. It's like my body wants to run away from it. If I go in my car and go somewhere and exhaust myself, I will somehow be better. So as soon as that happens now, I'm like, I probably should take a nap and drink some extra water right now.
The opposite of what I want.
Yeah, I think this is happening. Or maybe it's my survival instinct to gather all the things before I get sick. I don't know. But that we do have, depending on your situation, you may have more control or less control, and depending on your diagnosis. But we always have at least a little bit that we are in control of, even when we feel our worst, even when we can't do anything else, right? We can choose to, if I had the flu and I'm in bed, I can choose to listen to a meditation.
Right.
I'm not going to listen to it the whole time. I tell you what, I'm going to read some trashy book and I'm going to have my happiness, which is also a treat. So because it's so hard, especially when it has to do with your stomach. And some of the stuff you were saying, and I know nothing about this medically, so but like when you're saying food digests slower, it almost sounds like an Ozempic Wegovy, like what some people get as a side effect from that. Is there?
From the drug, from Ozempic?
Yeah, and actually Cheryl just got off of Ozempic like last week, and she's doing great. She's feeling better than she's felt in a long time.
Yeah, so again, that's wonderful. And I would also we can also touch on some like of my favorite, since we can make it more plant-based too, like talk about some of my favorite plant-based foods for gut health. We can, talk towards the very end of this for, what I will prescribe, if you will, for people to start incorporating after SIBO treatment, because, during, prior to SIBO, if they're dealing with like not being able to digest like the fiber very well, like if I try to overload fiber on them, they're going to hate me. So I won't do that then. But afterwards, we are always adding the fiber in. But no, that's a great, so there's different risk factors, like I said before, 75 for developing SIBO. And usually it's when it's resulted in a decrease of gut motility. So certain drugs can actually cause SIBO because over time it's caused a decrease in gut motility, which isn't allowing your gut to sweep bacteria out from the small intestine to the large intestine. People that have been on PPIs for an extended period of time, which are usually used for acid reflux, can cause SIBO. Again, concussions. That was actually my personal root cause. I got a concussion when I was swimming. That was the next day when I got into the pool to train again. My stomach bloated up like a balloon. Never had experienced bloating like that in my entire life. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And so it took almost 5 years to figure out that was my root cause. And different ones too. And so I'm, things that slow down gut motility, like even like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that's a condition where you become very hypermobile. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, can actually slow down gut motility and cause that as well. If somebody's not eating enough fiber and supporting their body, then they can actually develop SIBO from that as well. I'm trying to think of some other ones off the top of my head here. Hypothyroidism. So when your thyroid is underactive, that causes a decrease in gut motility. If you're not having proper bile flow, if you're not having enough stomach acid, things like that can all contribute to SIBO. And there's, again, even stress, being, a ton of stress that decreases our gut motility, because when we're in fight or flight, right, our body isn't trying to focus on digestion, it's focusing on running away from danger. So and then again, overloading your body on processed foods, all that kind of stuff. So, there's all kinds of risk factors that can lead to it. And again, it's not, if you just got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or you just got diagnosed with this or hypothyroidism, it does not mean you have SIBO. It doesn't mean every person has SIBO. It just means that over time it could develop into that. And if somebody is noticing gut issues, things like that, it would be very important to look into doing a breath test and seeing if they do have SIBO to help treat that. And then work on improving gut motility. And the last piece I will mention real quick is the number one cause of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, is actually food poisoning. Because what happens is, it's up to 80% of the causes of SIBO, because it triggers this response in your gut where it almost is like an autoimmune like response, where that bacteria that comes in, it actually will attack. It creates this autoimmune response in which our body actually attacks these specific cells within our small intestine that control the movement of our gut motility, essentially. Our migrating motor complex. It's the street sweeper of the gut. And so that migrating motor complex comes through during periods of fasting and actually sweeps bacteria from the small intestine to the large intestine. So when you have food poisoning, you actually you trigger a deficiency in that ability to occur. So then over time, you can develop a bacteria overgrowth just coming from the large intestine to the small intestine. So oftentimes I'll find, people will say, yes, I went, I was visiting somewhere in Mexico, I got food poisoning. And then, within a week, I just noticed I had horrible gut symptoms. I'm like, food poisoning. So that's a cause. So it's all very, very interesting when I work with people and I find all these reasons and, root causes and stuff that you don't normally would think about.
It's fascinating. And Mona says that she loves your common sense approach. Oh, and Lydia
Oh,
says, I've been on PPIs for the past 8 months, and I'm so scared to stop them because I'm just starting to be able to eat. I had esophagus and esophagitis.
esophagitis.
Say the word for
Yeah.
me.
Esophagitis, yeah, so
Thank you.
inflammation of the esophagus. Yeah, no, 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 it's okay. And and again, Lydia, I want to say that it's so important. Again, like kind of what we always talking about, like we have to look at the risks benefits ratio, right? Like that, and for what you're dealing with, right? That's going to be important for you to be on that to help support that acid reflux control, right? To be able to eat things and to be able to nourish your body, right? And so there's going to be, obviously in certain cases we can't, and what I'm saying here, it doesn't apply to every single person, right? But yeah, I just want to mention that piece that, there's risk benefits and, this is helping you. So we have to make sure that that's what you do to continue to help yourself.
Right. It can be so hard to be, you're taking something or you're part of this risk group, but we have to kind of think too, everything we take has the potential to have side effects. That's how I'm taking how you're doing, and I think some things it's really worth a risk, right? Because it's a percentage. Everything's percentages. This is why I feel like insurance is really just some sort of casino scam game. I pay for all the insurances, but it is, right? It's like this giant pyramid scheme, because then when you need that x-ray, they don't want to give it to you. It would be different if they did. But maybe I take Synthroid. Synthroid doesn't really have any effects, but Cheryl was taking some medication for her type 2 diabetes, right? That was very important for her. And she didn't just go, whoo, I'm not going to take any medication anymore. In fact, we waited until, because she has the little thing where she checks her blood sugar obsessively all day long. And she could not believe how much it was coming down. And that's when things started to happen. So I think, and before she needed to be on all of that because her resting or sleeping or blood sugar or whatever, what do they call it?
Resting heart rate?
No, the blood sugar one, like when you're, Cheryl, oh, she's not up here. Oh, what's the blood sugar thing you're checking? Fasting glucose level. You can tell I don't have this.
Oh gosh, no, don't even.
No.
Yeah.
And the thing is she said it to me like 80,000 times this weekend. I just can't retain it. So, but it got so low. Like before, it was never in the green, right? And because it color codes it, kind of like if you take your blood pressure at home. And then all of a sudden it was in the green, and all of a sudden when she would eat, it would go up and come down quickly instead of going up and staying up until sort of it came down, or like she had all these different things happening. And the whole point of saying that is sometimes you need medicine. That's why it's there.
Exactly.
And we're always going to be in kind of this middle ground. And I think especially those of us that are paying attention to our health and diets, can get a little obsessive. And that's why I like having you, Dr. Steph, on here instead of someone else who's going to be, no, you must do this and you must do that, because situations are different,
Yes.
And I think it's so important. So Lydia, I wanted to say some of that stuff too. I love that Dr. Steph was like, yeah, keep taking it because you need to eat, right? And then what could happen or may not happen is maybe your condition improves a little more, or you find a way to treat it and you're able to lessen or get off that. But some people are going to be on medications.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because with Dr. McDougall, I was kind of expecting everybody was going to be like, whew, you're off of everything. And I take a blood pressure medication that's a water pill, basically. And Dr. Lim had said I could go off of it if I wanted to, but I might see some weight gain. Did I want to wait till after the program? How's that going to make me feel in my head? And I was like, let's wait, right? So yesterday I didn't eat. And so, but he's so good at communicating things. And I think, Lydia, maybe you can even talk to your doctor about that and say, have you seen any side effects or some things happening in your patients? Because they have people that they can pull that information from. I don't know if you feel that way too.
Yeah, no, and I seriously love, and Lydia also said my cat's really cute, and I want to say thank you. I love my cats. I love them so much. Thank you. That was so sweet. So yes, there again, I love that you said that. Again, I don't ever like to look at medications as the enemy. I really don't, because they're there for a reason. And for example, even to if somebody's having like appendicitis, like we got to get them on antibiotics. Like, we can't just be like natural approach. Let's try to fast this out. Like we got to get you feeling good. We got to kill that bacteria. Like we can't be waiting around. So it's, and the same thing with like a thyroid, right? Like it's important, like if you're diagnosed with a hypothyroid, like you have to be on thyroid medication. Like there's nowhere around that, right? And some people are able to get off it after a certain point, but most people can't. And there's nothing wrong with that actually. Like it's actually, you need to support your thyroid because that's important for your health. Like it controls so many bodily functions. So same thing with diabetes. It's just, a risk benefit. Like we have to look at like, what do we need to do for you right now for your health? And then we work on other lifestyle factors, other things that can support you. And then who knows, maybe you'll get to the point where you can get off of it. If you don't, there's nothing wrong with that. And they're there for a reason. And I do think it can be easy, especially sometimes I don't mean this for bad, but in the plant-based world, I think it can be easy to say, oh, well, let's just be all natural all the time. And it's like, well, we can't. Like there's certain things that we're going to have to, have medication for or take antibiotics for, or, I'm not going to be able to be completely toxin free, and that's okay. Like I can't, it's just we got to do what we can, where we can, reducing toxic load and remembering not getting stressed about it. That's the important piece, is we cannot over stress about anything. We have to take things one step at a time, do what we can control, have those self-care days like Kathy mentioned, and go from there. That's the biggest thing.
I think that's like,
oh, you're muted again.
I am.
Sorry.
I'm unmuting when I'm on the other screen. It leaves me muted here for some reason. I don't know what's going on. But I think that's one of the best things to hear. And I love my plant-based community, and I love my community so much. But I do think, and even some of the questions that I asked to like my health specialist this week were nitpicky questions, and the thing is like, is it more important that you're eating super healthy, or is it more important that you get this one new pan that you can't afford today? That one new pan is probably not going to make a life and death difference or a 50% increase in life quality. However, if that's an easy change for you to make, then yay, right? Like I'm all about the easy changes. And I think that it's so great to hear it from you too, because I think sometimes we get so excited about changes that work for us that we try to put them on other people. So that's why even when I've talked about the McDougall program, I'm like, there's plenty of other programs. There's plenty of other doctors. You do what works for you, right? And that's the most important thing. And don't feel bad. I think sometimes in the plant-based community, we feel either bad or shameful about having issues or diagnosis, right? That's one of the reasons why I've just been so public about my fatty liver and some of my processes, because, I have a friend who is in the community who had breast cancer, and people were just emailing her with all the things she needed to do or accusing her of not actually eating a plant-based diet. Wow. Oh yeah. So if you're prominent and you have a disease, sometimes people are like, and in my unboxing video, my Costco haul video, really, someone after that was like, is Kay Hester even on the McDougall diet? Has she lost any weight? Her books, I've looked at her books. They're not very healthy. They have oil in them. And it's like, I've had oil-free options in all of my books except the very first one, because the publisher took them out. Because everybody eats at my table, right? If you're oil-free, salt-free, sugar-free, gluten-free, soy-free, I will hook you up. And so what's been really neat for me, and I'm working on this, like it didn't hurt my feelings like it might have in the past, and I just deleted it because I didn't want any of you guys to like go crazy on her mostly. She will live her own quiet, punishment. But I'm just thinking, how sad must your life be that not only did you not watch this video, or you would have known if I was on the plan and what was going on, that you left this comment, so I try, when you hear from some other people, if it's like, well, I couldn't go without meat, because some people have said, oh, you've lost some weight. I'm like, yeah, it was so easy. I can eat all the potatoes I want. Oh, no meat, I can never do that. And we always, there's always, I can never do that. And you don't have to. My answer is, you don't have to. It's okay. You get to be you. I don't even want to police any of y'all's food, for real. Like, you're vegan, you just come to me because you want to add some more veggies in and get a recipe. We're still friends. It's okay. I'm stressed out enough that I don't need to take everybody else's stresses, which I tend to do. I'm like a little sponge. Give me all the stress. And now I'm really working on keeping it down. But don't let people persuade you that something is wrong with you, like really wrong, like you're wrong. And when basically your body's out of balance and you're doing your best to get it to where it can be, right?
Yeah. Kathy, you said that so beautifully. There is so many points where I was like I was just getting so inwardly excited about what you said, because that deeply saddens me to hear about your friend that had breast cancer, and that people were saying, the piece like, oh, maybe she wasn't doing the, what do you call it, the plant-based diet right, or doing this right, or something. It's like, when we develop any sort of condition or disease, it's so multifactorial. It goes well beyond diet. It really does. And the diet piece is so important, but we should never judge or anything to anybody of what they're going through, because everyone's going to be doing the best that they can and absorbing what they feel like they should be doing. And, oftentimes when we get diagnosed with something, a lot of people will be like, you should do this, this, and this. And that gets very overwhelming and a stressor. So, it's important to listen to what feels right to you intuitively. Listen to that gut feeling. I always tell my patients, listen to your gut feeling, because you'll know if something feels right to you or doesn't feel right to you, right? And I'll say a decent amount of my patients aren't plant-based, and I don't force anyone to do it. My goal is to add more plants, and then over time, usually they can kind of get there. But I would never try to force this, this way of eating. I would say everyone needs to get to this point on their own. They need to want it and need to feel it's right for them in that moment, right? So I 100% agree with everything you said, and that's why I love this show, because we're very open about that, and we really just it's a good atmosphere. It's do what you can when you can, what feels right to you, because that's very important.
The mute off this time. I just want a little round of applause for that, because I feel like that's a big accomplishment today. This is day one after the 12-day plan, so my brain is all scrambled. No, and I love that, and I think that's what's so important. And everybody has a different mission, So some people's missions are to spread information and stuff, and I think it's just really important. Just try and be kind. Literally, just, kindness, it doesn't cost you anything. Even if you're really in the most heinous, blackest of places, you still would pet a kitten, right? Most of us, I'm sure there's whatever percentage that are psychopathic mass murderers would not be in that one, but or if you don't like cats, a puppy, or you can look out and enjoy a flower, right? So, and that's why I always say on the show, and we're going to kind of wrap things up too, is that, what I really want for you to do as a favor to me is do one kind thing for yourself today. It could be eating an orange, it could be taking a walk, it could be reading your favorite book, it could be watching another YouTube video. One of my guilty things, TikTok. I have the most beautiful TikTok feed. It is all humor and lightness and fun, And so we'll just sit in the car and watch them for a while because it's just like so uplifting. So whatever that is that brings you a little bit of joy, then if you have a little bit left over, if it's not one of those deep, dark days, to a person or an animal, just say hi. Just say, your shoes are cute. You know, I know it feels weird at first, and I do it all the time. And I know people are like, who is that weird lady talking to me? But I'm like, you know, if there's a cashier, if I just saw someone be horrible to them, I will say, if anybody else is horrible to you today, you tell them that Kathy Hester is going to come get them. Because at least they get to hear something nice. And I've been on the other side, right? I've been on the other side. And just remember, there may be some people you can't be around all the time, but you can still smile as you're walking by them. So you're not picking up any of that stress or negativity, but you can still give out a little happiness.
Oh, Kathy, you're such a wonderful human. I feel the exact same way, and I always try to say hi to people, or I try to always just be a light in someone else's life that might be struggling a little bit, because it's important. And you are so wonderful. I'm sure I know, like, all your audience just loves you. I love you. I hope one day I'm out in North Carolina, because I seriously would love to grab like lunch with you sometime. I think we'd have the best time. So it's on a to-do list to go out back to North Carolina, because my alma mater is Chapel Hill.
I know.
So one day I will make it out there, probably next year. I will be out there, and I will let you know, and you'll take me to your favorite vegan restaurant. I can't wait.
Oh yeah, we'll go to Fiction Kitchen probably if we can swing it, which is awesome. And we're actually just decided we're going to go to Sacramento. Chef AJ is doing a day-long thing in Sacramento in September. I don't know if you're going, and I know that's not super close either.
No, my whole September is like booked right now, like the whole weekend. I'm actually speaking at the Veg Fest though. That is September. I don't know if anyone here that's listening lives in Orange County, but it's like one of the largest vegan festivals in the nation, and it's September 23rd. I will be speaking that day. So if anybody is around, or if you're around, happen to be, just come on by at Veg Fest. In Orange County, I will be there.
Send me that, and I'll pop it in one of my emails too, because I know I have people who watch from California for sure.
Oh yay! I would love that. I will send that.
But yes, we'll have to like do a whole live lunch date or something, so people can hear us giggling and everything.
I know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I just absolutely love it. I can't wait to be back on next time. We'll chat about what we'll talk about, but I can't wait. It's always fun, and I super appreciate you having me on the show. And for everyone listening, thank you so much.
Dr. Steph is awesome, and so are you. Go have an amazing day, and I will talk to you guys real soon.